Good morning, 5301. Today we are moving back into a lesson for fantasy reading rather than our read aloud. And today's lesson is all about using information to better understand your fantasy stories. And I'll explain what that means. So, fantasy writers, right? When you were writing your story or the authors of the books you're reading, they research information to make sure it is accurate or correct. Therefore, fantasy readers should refer to nonfiction information to understand what they are reading about. So sometimes you might be reading your fantasy book and curious about something like medieval times and the history of dragons, or a different setting, or something that they mention in the book that you'd like to learn more about, that you're curious about. And so today you're going to look up information that you're curious about in your fantasy book to better understand it. So your job today, as you're reading, use nonfiction text or research to understand characters, settings, and events. So as a reader, sometimes we find things we are curious about or wondering about as we read a fantasy or fiction story. And I know that's happened for me, and I'm sure for all of you guys as well. So for example, while reading The Thief of Always, you might be curious about the author and what influenced him to create this book. I've definitely been wondering that. And that could be something that I research, right? The history, the life of the author, and trying to find interviews online where he discusses some of his inspiration for this book. Here are some other examples of things you might be wondering or curious about that you can look up when you're reading your fantasy story. So your fantasy story may contain technology that you want to research further. So even though time travel isn't real, maybe there's something that they mention that does have some aspect of reality that you want to look into. If your story takes place in a castle, you may want to learn more about the history of castles. Castles are real. They existed hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Or if your setting is during a specific time period, like a world war, okay, or World War I, you may choose to read more about what the world was like during this time. So this brings to mind, if you've read it, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The children in the book, the brothers and sisters, have to go live somewhere else because of World War II. So it's something that you might want to look up and research so you understand the setting better. So readers of fantasy use information from nonfiction texts, real text, to better understand their fantasy stories. So today, go out and research something about your text to understand it better. So what that's going to look like for you today, after you read your independent book, you are going to open up your task, your fantasy task for today. Let's go over the directions. Read your independent fantasy book for 30 minutes. Of course, you could read longer if you'd like. As you'd read, determine what you would like to research to understand the book better. I know a lot of you are reading the Warrior series, so maybe there's mention of cats in the book, like specific species that you want to learn more about. And then fill in the boxes below to show us what new information you learned. So you're going to put the title of your fantasy book here, what you're curious about or what you would like to learn more about in this middle box, and then do some research. You guys have done really well on independent research. So do a Google search, find some articles, find any sort of information that might help you understand your book better. I'm really interested to see what you guys would like to learn more about based on your books. So I'm looking forward to reviewing this assignment. Bye, guys.